Over the past few years, I have unfortunately had to talk a lot about localization, which removes references to certain things that in modern day are considered too offensive. But now I have to talk about Pikmin 1 and 2 removing references to gambling and gendered language. I have a few different things that I want to show off, but before we get into the topic, if you enjoy the content that I create, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Follow me on social media so you can see when my content is posted, and of course, if you do really enjoy the videos and live streams I create, consider becoming a Dark Titan via Patreon or a supporter via YouTube memberships. Now, honestly, over the past few years, I haven't really had to talk all that much about Nintendo forcing censorship on developers or, removing content from their games that could be seen as too offensive. And recently I had to talk about the rumor circulating that Nintendo is getting rid of Mamma Mia for Wowie Zowie because Mamma Mia is seen as too offensive now. But there's no real substance behind that rumor. And now we're seeing Pikmin 1 and 2 removing references to things like gambling and gendered language. It says a fan noticed that Pikmin 1 and 2 included an updated localization which removed references to gambling as well as removing several instances of gendered language. Pikmin 1 and 2 is a remaster of the original Pikmin games, including the first two games in the series into a single collection. While it's been known that some changes were made, such as the removal of a Duracell battery to a more generic one, these translation changes are coming to light. Now, yeah, I mean, something like a Duracell battery name being changed to something more generic, that's not really that surprising. But hearing that they are removing things like gendered language is absurd. It says changes including the items Gemstar Wife and Gemstar Husband being altered to Red Gemstar and Green Gemstar respectively. I don't understand why the terms husband and wife are seen as something that needs to be removed from video games. Now, what is the problem with having a husband and a wife, especially when we are talking about inanimate objects here? I mean, we are talking about gem stars. Is it really that serious? In my opinion, no, it shouldn't be. But of course it is, because if you are looking for something to offend you, you are going to find it. And we don't actually know who did the localization for this. We simply know that it's Nintendo. I mean, Pikmin is Nintendo. But there had to have been somebody specific working on this title that made small changes like this. I don't think any way that someone at Nintendo was like, you have to remove the terms wife and husband from this. I mean, there's always the possibility, right? But this to me screams a localizer taking the game into their own hands and making the changes that they think are the most important. It says adult humor like a tomato being some kind of aphrodisiac was also watered down for the game. You can find a more comprehensive list of the changes below. Yeah, as you can see, the GameCube and Wii is on the left, the Switch is on the right. You've collected the Husband's Tear series. Women cry with joy, men just cry at the price, which I think is really funny, but you can't have that in your video game anymore. And it just says you've collected the Expensive Sentiment series, Declare Your Love and Bankruptcy All at Once. The one on the right is not bad. You still kind of get the idea, but the first one is just so funny. You've collected the Space Love series. These designs transcend intergalactic cultural barriers. And then on the right, you've collected the Celestial Vibes series. Oh, I hate that word, vibes. I just don't like it. Rare sources of deep feelings from deep space. Yeah, I mean, they're just not as good. They're just not as funny. I just don't see why humor has to be removed from the game. But when it comes to something like husband and wife and having this gendered language, I mean, this is completely absurd. There are going to be people out there who are going to say things like, oh, what does it matter? It's really not that important. But clearly it did matter. And clearly it was so important that they felt the need to pay people to take time and actually change this. I mean, it is absurd. They shouldn't have changed this, but they did. And I completely understand that this is going to upset people, even to the point where you might decide not to purchase this remaster collection now that you know what they have changed in it. Honestly, this isn't really all that surprising. The only reason why it's kind of surprising is because it is Nintendo. Again, Nintendo does censor things. They're not 100% perfect, but we've seen situations like this happen several times over the past few years, not with them, but with other companies. As you can see, Capcom had promised to culturize games during localization, and this was, back in June, this was announced. They decided that they were, going to change their localization process to include considering Japanese norms, which could end up hurting users. And while we haven't seen anything specific come of this, I'm sure that it is on the horizon. We are going to see this happen in the near future. I hate this. Companies should not be worrying about culturizing their games. They should simply be, porting them or releasing them in the way that the creatives originally intended them. It shouldn't be that serious. And honestly, the only people who might be hurt by Japanese norms are sensitive snowflakes who are not going to buy your game anyway. This is the problem that companies don't understand, is that the people who are perpetually offended, the people who you are changing something like Pikmin for, they know that there was already like gendered language in it. So they're going to say, well, I'm not going to purchase it even if you've removed it because I know that it existed in the past. These people are never happy, and that's why you should not bend the knee to them. We also had Triangle Strategies English translation butchered. The word woman was seen as offensive. Now, this, of course, was Square Enix making this decision, but we had found out that the English release of Triangle Strategy has succumbed to the same fate as so many other Japanese titles, as the dialogue was found to have been localized, changing the tone or attitude of certain lines whilst rewriting others to boost the female characters up. The word woman was often swapped out for neutral words, and according to one Twitter user, translators are allegedly instructed to not use the words as it could be deemed offensive to Western audiences. As a woman, I absolutely hate this. I want the term woman to be in my entertainment, to be in my video games, because I am a woman. I want to see other women. I want to see other men. I mean, that's just the way that it goes. I do not think that gendered language should be seen as offensive, that it needs to be removed from content. But this is the clown world that we are now living in, where you can't have a video game where the female character is being referred to as a woman because that might be offensive to certain audiences. A lot of people in the West are sensitive snowflakes. They do get offended at everything, but there's going to be a point where creatives are going to hit a wall, and they are going to have to either completely sacrifice their vision in order to please these people, or they're just going to have to do what they want, create what they want, what they think is going to sell, because, of course, we have them creating the content they want now, and there are changes being made like this, like, oh, in localization, the term woman is removed, but what happens when they are told you can't create something with the word woman? Then they're going to have to completely change up the content that they're making, and there are, developers and creatives now who definitely do take, Western norms into consideration, and it just never turns out well. And this is a very sad situation to hear, because I I'm sick and tired of seeing things like this being deemed as too offensive gambling. Oh no. A game that most likely only adults are really playing and you're removing references to gambling. Oh no, gendered language. It's just absurd. And of course, there's going to be people out there who are going to say, what does it matter if we removed it? Well, it mattered enough that it was removed. If it wasn't seen as that big of a deal, then why change it in the first place? Why pay people to actively alter the content and actually have to think about, oh, what can I replace this with? It is absurd, and I am so sad to see this happen. I'm sure that a lot of people are going to be very disappointed with this, very upset over this, but this is the situation. Pikmin 1 and 2's remaster have removed references to things like gambling and gendered language because they were probably seen as a little bit too offensive by the Snowflakes. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this and of course found it important and informative, make sure to give it a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you didn't, make sure to give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I will talk to you all again in the next video really soon.